there was some controversy over the fact that Macron had engaged with Hezbollah, particularly with regard to some French reporting by Georges Malbruno. And I've been somewhat critical of Macron's visits to Beirut. To me, there's a very neo-colonial tone to them. Clearly, the country is on its knees, as Vivian said, and there has to be some conditionality placed on any sort of bailout. Macron has really been doing a public grandstanding kind of tour. What's interesting to me is that he seems more popular on the street in Beirut than he does in France. And one of the things that I feel has been missing from the whole talk about the reforms to the Lebanese system, and the Lebanese political class and the system needs reform, obviously. The problem isn't necessarily the sectarian system per se, although it handicaps things and paralyzes things. But the problem is that through the sectarian system, there's been this state capture and just a appropriation of all the wealth of the country. And if you look at the relationship between France and Lebanon, France is kind of part of that system. And so when the French president is talking about the need to clean up Lebanese politics, if he's not also talking about the way in which France, as the sort of neo-colonial power, contributes to that, to me, there's something really missing from the conversation. I've seen some reporting about the degree to which Lebanese trade or French trade with Lebanon is very modest. But if you look at the foreign direct investment, for instance, it's pretty eye-opening. France doesn't invest that much in Lebanon. There's $3 billion worth of Lebanese assets in France today. Now, that's an overall total. It's not a yearly investment. But when you're talking about an economy with roughly 50 billion, 53 billion, I think, in gross domestic product, that's an enormous amount of money. And, I don't have proof of anything, but in general, when you're talking about a system that's corrupt like the Lebanese system, and you're talking about that much wealth that's been expropriated toward France, it's enough to ask some questions. So I've been somewhat critical and skeptical of Macron's intervention, not just because I think there's certain structural constraints to what he can achieve, but also because of the blind spots in what he's been talking about. With regard to the U.S., the Malbruno article that caused Macron to publicly and very violently criticize him on this latest trip, which I found disgraceful. I don't know how accurate it is, but he suggested that Hezbollah is wondering what America's response is going to be. So I think in some ways Macron is very publicly playing this role of the knight in shining armor who can save the situation. But I think that there are all these other regional actors and all the players on the political chessboard in Lebanon that will have to weigh in, and that becomes a really complicated situation to try to mediate. And I think that that's what France is doing, is trying to mediate and applying some pressure. But I don't think that Macron single-handedly can achieve as much as he's seeking.
I think there's a few things to clarify. It's very hard to say that Macron is acting like a neo-colonialist when you see that the entire political establishment is asking him to intervene, and when you see that a part of the people who are in the street, the Lebanese people, want him to intervene. That's not how a neo-colonialist works. Second of all, on the issue claimed in the Malbruno article, the Élysée, very high level people... This is just
for Le Figaro, just to make it clear.
Yes, in Le Figaro. About Macron calling Trump and discussing a list of people to sanction in Lebanon. Very high level, Élysée officials have repeatedly denied that is the case. That is all I have to say.
I wasn't necessarily referring to that particular aspect of his article. I was referring to the interest among Hezbollah of whether Macron can shift the U.S. logic or the position. So, in other words, there's a lot of attention there being paid to what Macron can deliver in terms of other actors, including the U.S. So, again, in terms of that particular piece of reporting, I'm not weighing in there. I don't, I'm not someone who brandishes neo-colonialism and that sort of thing often or very lightly. I don't necessarily think that because he's been invited in by the political parties there necessarily changes the structure of that relationship.
All right.